On, Paul, 5 minutes after, 4 minutes after, shall we give it a go?
Sure. Thank you, Daryl.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ron Kovach, and I'm the Executive Director of AIAA, the American International Accrediting Association of Schools and Colleges. I'm pleased to co-present today's session with Edmentum. Edmentum is one of our trusted partners, and they certainly are an international leader in providing educational resources for school improvement. And so it certainly is very appropriate for AIA to be working with Edmentum today to present information on improving schools. Before we begin, again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. And just like to quickly mention that Edmentum is one of our trusted partners. And in fact, one of their resources, EdOptions Academy, has been recently accredited by AIAA, and we're very pleased to add that to our list of partners that can help schools improve. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Paul Montague, who is the International Digital Learning and Curriculum Manager, to begin today's webinar on improving schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. It's great to be working with the AIAA around the world, and welcome to everybody who's attending today. A little bit of background about myself. I've been in education for 25 years, various different sort of responsibilities. I started off as a geography teacher, and I think I'm still at heart a geography teacher, but then moved on to a school improvement manager, a government advisor, a curriculum development manager with Pearson, Middle East consultant with GL Education, and now I'm Edmonton's Digital Curriculum and Learning Manager and support the schools and manage the schools within the Middle East region in particular. The main element of my role is to ensure that schools, if they decide they're going to take one of our solutions, that the implementation process is faultless and that they're using them to the best effect. And my aim is always to make sure that schools are improving, and we're helping them to do so. Give you some background about what we do within the Middle East and who we work with. So from a Middle East perspective, we've got an agreement with ADEC, so the Abu Dhabi arm of the education arm of the Abu Dhabi government. We work with their charter schools, which from next year will be 25,000 students, and they all use one of our solutions called ExactPath to help them improve in terms of maths and language and reading arts and reading. We also then work with some of the biggest school groups throughout the Middle East, so GEMS, Aldar, Talim. We work with all of those groups, and some of them are using ExactPath, some of them will be using our courseware, our digital curriculum, and then some will also be using our online school to support them and extend the courses that they can offer. It's my pleasure to introduce Daryl today, and Daryl's the head of our education advisor group, and he works out of the United States. So with no further ado, I'll hand over to you, Daryl.
Well, Ron, thanks, guys. Good to see everybody today. It's exciting. It's a good time to start thinking about what education does and where we're at. A little bit of the laundry list of places that I've wandered through in my career, much like Paul, we're getting on in a little bit of years, and in the 20+ category of time in the industry and working through things. I like this picture because it has a palm tree and reminds me of being able to travel a little bit. There aren't palm trees where I live, and so seeing one in a picture is always a nice reminder. Simply put, today our time is going to be spent working through some of the key categories that I see with my team globally in the consultative realm, and I'll sprinkle through kind of the things that I do and Edmentum does and the way we support schools as we go through. So by the time we're done, hopefully you'll have a good picture of both how consultative measures can be put into place, but ultimately leveraging tools and resources and content effectively in your programming. And the goal then is, and Paul and I and Ron have had good conversation around the idea of putting resources and tools in place to increase student achievement, effectiveness, marketing and branding, and thinking about how to take your specific program or your group or your angle at education and increase your stature and footprint, which again, has that ripple effect of putting good programming in place, which increases enrollment and, can be attached to some overall revenue goals and things of that nature. So we have overall overarching themes. We have a targeted flexible programming conversation that I'm going to walk through. I'm going to touch on some instructional strategies that are prevalent in the industry right now that we're seeing throughout, which is directly tied to student achievement. And I'm noticing that in a previous conversation, there was some consortium pricing options. That's not necessarily for today, but Paul will definitely give you the cost and the work through as you look to continue your conversation with Edmentum. A little bit of backstory. Edmentum has been around since 1960 in various capacities. So mild history lesson, Paul's a geography teacher, so close. It's in the social studies realm a little bit, but when we think about Plato learning and digital curriculum and content, all the way back in 1960 in the United States, in the University in Illinois, they were creating distant content, and it was the idea of training and allowing users to consume goods asynchronously was kind of the spirit of it. And that built out. And then you can see in 97, there was that partnership with EdOptions and building out processes and acquisition of products and tools to build things out. Plato Learning rebranded back in 2012 to Edmentum. That's around when I was a customer. I was building a couple of online schools in Minnesota in the United States, and was using the Plato Learning courseware content with my teachers. And then ExactPath, which is a really important tool that we will talk through today as well, a handful of years ago. That is completely proprietary. It's been built inside of Edmentum, not an acquisition, but really strong partnerships with Calvert Learning, which rounds out the K-12 suite of curriculum. FEV Tutor is a 24-hour tutoring program that can be positioned anywhere at any time. And then Base Education is a social emotional learning tool that we're really proud to partner with Base and position that as a digital curriculum resource in programming. So as you can see, Edmentum has grown in its breadth of offerings, and there really isn't a spot in your education programming that we can't support. Right? And so again, just starting top left here as a reminder, because these icons are going to be used specifically throughout as a reminder of this is the solution to the overarching conversation that we're having. So if you think about it, ExactPath, that is a diagnostic driven learning path that gets created, individualized and adaptively for a student. Study Island is a resource that is a formative and check for understanding and a benchmark option to build out assessments with. I think it's a gajillion, Paul, of the amount of questions that are in there. I'm not sure. I might be overestimating, but it's close. So there's a large breadth of question banks to leverage around specific skills, and you could position them in any way you want, whether, again, it's a quick check for understanding or a large benchmarking option. Courseware, of course, is the curriculum option that everybody knows, 400 plus courses in every content and subject area that you would ever want. World-class digital curriculum that you can put into your programming straight away. Calvert is the sister piece of that. That's the K-5 digital curriculum option. Courseware is 6 through 12. Base Education, and then is, like I said, that SEL curriculum. Virtual Academy, this is an important piece, and Dr. Kovach mentioned it already, in the realm of there is a fully accredited online program where you offer content and we offer the teacher, and that symbiotic relationship. So a teacher and curriculum is a package that you can offer to your program and to your learners. And again, 400 some plus content areas. And then, like I mentioned the FDV tutor. There's other bits and bobs. I glossed over reading eggs mildly on purpose in the sense that it is a literacy piece, but it is a foundational literacy tool. And then Paul also has access to a resource called Education City that is, again, a primary aged K-5 early content supplemental tool that's there as well. Paul, anything? How did I do? Did I miss anything? Is that
no? That's great. No, that's perfect, Daryl. Absolutely spot on. Yeah. No, thank you.
I've been practicing, so that's good. Okay. When Edmentum enters conversations, what we're really doing is helping. And I chose this slide kind of because it's dramatic, but it's also the idea of we can really think through the angles and the needs that schools are currently at, and coming out of, or hopefully that light at the end of the tunnel of this COVID and the pandemic, we're really seeing some fundamental and major shifts in education. And there's I will say, I think a really great opportunity to grab onto some systemic change, especially in the areas of pedagogy, in the area of design and instruction, and really thinking about what's going to have to stay and what's going to have to stick. And when we boil that down, what schools are really seeing and what programs are seeing is there's challenges around that enrollment, especially the keeping. The growing can happen, and that's directly tied to quality programming or offerings or giving learners a something that they maybe haven't had access to before. But the keeping is important. Students now have more access and more options than they've ever had before. And so if we're in the business of retaining students or enrolling more to increase revenue, then we're certainly looking at what those challenges are. Secondarily, we're seeing flexibility. This word I say probably 20 times a day or more, and the idea of the flexibility that has been necessary to even maintain during COVID times, and that was starting to be really prevalent pre-COVID, a year plus, almost 2 years ago now, in the idea of it's almost a requirement to have some sort of digital and online virtual option. If you aren't, there's got to be a pretty compelling reason why you wouldn't. That is an expectation of learners and communities and families moving into the education realm. And then those next layers are, how do you do that? What does that look like to do it well? And that's where the hybrid combinations come in, or pods and community-based options. And so I want to touch on some of the things we're seeing with pods and communities today. I think we all have a working knowledge of what a hybrid would look like. Students are both at home or maybe somewhere off-site asynchronously, but then they are also in a building and working directly with teachers and staff. And then that ties into the new expectations from communities. Unprecedented access, families, students, stakeholders at home supporting learners, they've had unprecedented access to what the goings-ons of school. And that curtain has been pulled back, whatever cliche you want to use. It's the idea of that bell can't be unrung, to just insert one more, Paul, of how we as consumers, right? I have a daughter who worked through in the US system 2nd grade. Now she's moving to 3rd grade. She was home, distance learning. I learned and saw more this year having her home than I ever did. And I was thinking about it. I'm like, next fall, I will lose all that access I had. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. Now I'm a little more intensive and I pay a little bit more closer attention maybe than some or most because of my background and my interest. But the idea of how do we maintain or even increase or continue that community involvement and putting the right tools and options in place. The two tools that Edmentum offers that fits into these large overarching buckets out of the gate, hands down, is courseware, in the sense that it is, again, digital curriculum that can fit in multiple instructional styles tomorrow, today, right? You know, a teacher can leverage it as a supplemental or a response or, you know, an enrichment or an accelerated aspect to really put students in a position of strength and success and really grow your programming. Digital content has that, and I'm gonna illustrate some more examples of that. Secondary to that, when you think about new expectations from communities, a quick, easy, user-friendly diagnostic assessment, which is what ExactPath is. Learner sits down, takes an adaptive assessment. Now you have data that's both consumable by family and learner to set some goals, as well as educators, so you can track and put metrics in place to measure success as you go along. So big picture, enrollment, flexible program offerings, how do we support communities, digital content, and a strong intervention adaptive assessment really do round out options in that category. I forgot to mention, and Paul is a fantastic chat and Q&A moderator. I'm going to lean on his expertise today. So if you do have something and you want to add or you have a question, leverage the chat pod. If you haven't found that already, please do. We have some people from all over the world, Massachusetts and the States, UAE, I know Cairo and Paris were represented. So please use the chat, say hi if nothing else. I get offended if no one says hello to me. And then when we talk about questions, there is a Q&A, a question and an answer pod. If you want to put a question in there, that can be held and I'll either answer it real time, and Paul's always good at interrupting if it's a timely question that we want to cover. Perfect. There we go. Chat's coming on with some people saying hello. I love it. All right. In the big category of student achievement, so we'll spend a little bit of time here thinking about what this first one is an accelerated approach. There's some really interesting research out there right now, and this goes back even a few years, but it's become more prevalent. An accelerated approach doesn't mean faster. So I just want to call that out right away. But in thinking about offering flexible programming and moving learners forward faster, but let me offer that caveat. There's good research out there, and I'll show you a graphic here in a second after this slide. Iraq, Lebanon, that's a fun. Hi George, good to see you. When we think about acceleration, here's the idea. If Paul is my learner, it's pick on Paul day, so we're just going to go with that a little bit. If Paul's my learner and I'm offering something about fractions, and he's in a cohort where I know maybe some diagnostic data that he might have some skills gaps. Traditional thinking or response to intervention or an MTSS type of model where you're saying, okay, if Paul has some skills gaps, we're gonna maybe remove him, or we're gonna set aside some time and address what we found out about his skills gaps. And then we're gonna fill them so that we have him prepared for when we talk about fractions today. Where the shift in the thinking is to really say, okay, let's not remove Paul from the learning moment. Let's take and extend that learning moment and include some of the opportunities that Paul might have lost or is missing, or just maybe kind of needs some help remembering. So again, if we're talking about fractions, I'm going to introduce and recall and remind Paul that fractions are parts of a whole. And that if we take a pizza and we divide it into 8, that is 8 out of 8. Oh, good news, Paul, that's a fraction. Remember that part, like parts of a whole. Now I'm stimulating his recall and immediately leveraging that recollection and that prior knowledge, or I'm teaching Paul parts of the whole straight away. And now he understands, oh, right, I can take a whole thing, and that's the bottom number, and I can have a part of it. Maybe it's 4 of the 8 slices of the pizza. And now I'm going to go into talking about fractions, and maybe we're doing common denominators or something, right? So in line, in that moment, we're offering that remediation or skills. When I say accelerated approach, that's the idea. We're accelerating the student's knowledge on the topic that we're trying to teach real time by introducing prior knowledge and key concepts that are foundational to what we're doing. So the goal there is thinking about how do we take our tools and do those things. And again, it's the idea we have a diagnostic tool that also has the ability to assign curriculum, content. ExactPath has a lesson and a quick practice and a little formative assessment that tells us good information in line with the teacher's day. And I'm gonna show an illustration of that, but I really wanted to paint that picture of that story of when we talk about an accelerated approach, it really ties into truly personalizing our learning. And what I mean by that is Paul has targeted specific skills gaps. We know that because he took the diagnostic in ExactPath. I also know that I can give him directly related to the skills that I'm instructing on today. And again, this could be distant, this could be in a hybrid situation, this could be Paul's in my class every day, all day, right? Lucky him. And the goal there is thinking about taking the tools, ExactPath in this case, and putting it in an efficient and quick inline cadence in that instructional day. And it's all aligned to standards, it's all aligned to skills. Skills are skills, standards are standards. So it's the idea of where you're at in your expectations for the student, you can leverage those tools in quick, consumable ways. And that accelerated approach is important. I'm going to circle back to that. Personalizing it, and then also if you have in-line already tiered intervention, it fits that too. Don't abandon it, even though the research is compelling you to think about keeping students in that instructional moment. Models where you have a pull-out or a tier 1, tier 2 intervention, tier 1 being all learners in consideration. Tier 2 would be based on metrics of data, we're going to either pull out or push in supplemental support, right? That's back where it's like Paul is struggling with some options around how to work with reading comprehension. The goal there would be some supplemental and more targeted spots where we're increasing Paul's ability to consume and then maybe retell, right, or whatever the skill is.
Daryl,
So,
it might be worth mentioning at this point, there's sort of 3 broad case studies that we could introduce here. So, as I mentioned previously, ADEC, who are the Abu Dhabi government's education arm, they've got their own charter schools that are managed by a public-private partnership. So we've got private schools who manage those local schools with those local children for ADEC. And they use ExactPath exactly for that purpose, to identify the skills gaps and then provide instruction, practice, and mastery activities so that they can accelerate the learning, they can personalize the learning, and their children are catching up on their learning gaps faster. Now, we're talking about 25,000 students within those schools, and they also then offer to the children who are furthest behind, so maybe 2 to 3 grade levels behind, they attach FEV Tutor to it, which is our tutor service, which is available 24/7, so that at any time of the day or night when students are actually doing this, and sitting within ExactPath and working through ExactPath. If they get stuck, they've got access to a tutor. Indeed, we've also got our own tutors offering foundation skills instruction. That's just started yesterday, and essentially what you do again is ExactPath generates and identifies the skills gaps that those students have got. You've got a matrix of courses that are or foundational skills topics that are available, and you select which topics you want to put your students in to get a live hour lesson delivered by our academy teachers every day of the week if you wanted to, okay, to support what you're doing in school to help them catch up and recover any learning that they may have lost. And that's available as a summer school program for the next 2 months. It's available on a semester basis, or it's available on a whole year basis next year to support the teaching that's taking place within your classrooms and to help those students catch up. Sorry, Daryl, I intruded there.
You're welcome anytime. And like I said, you're good at interrupting. So that was just a good exemplar of your skill at that. No problem. There was a good question in the chat around, does this approach suit all learning styles? And the general answer is yes, of course, right? Digital curriculum and an adaptive assessment tool is for everyone. And then how you approach that is then more of that instructional pedagogy. And it's again, flexible in the way that if you, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some instructional strategies. So I'm going to stop myself here, but indeed, definitely you can use digital curriculum in every model that you're approaching learning, all the way down to a learner, previewing something, you layering in, and then the review and supplemental things. So let me answer that one a little bit more, but I wanted to call that out, that was certainly a good piece of the puzzle. One more. Yeah, go ahead, Paul. No, you're great.
There's a question that's been asked, and do you have statistics about the impact of ExactPath in this particular case study? And that's a really critical and important question, obviously. Yes, we do. It's proven that 30 minutes activity within their learning path on a weekly basis leads to significant improvements in the quality of learning that's taking place. Okay. Yeah. I have just been involved in a pilot with a school, and I won't name that school. They're within the UAE because that's unfair. And we've just done a Spearman's rank correlation coefficient to look at the impact that it's had on their children. And it's worked out as plus 0.93. Now, those of you who know Spearman's correlation will know that 1 is the highest that you can possibly get. So that is an unbelievably high positive correlation between the amount of time that students are spending in ExactPath to the impact it's having on improving their learning. So it really does. If students spend time in ExactPath, they will improve, because it not only does the diagnosis part of it, it then gives them instruction tailored in the areas that they don't know. So it's meeting them where they're at. And because it's meeting them there and it's not assuming any knowledge, in essence, it's reteaching it, you get that acceleration because they experience success straight away. And when they experience success, they get much more motivated. And you will see then some of the weaker children actually improving the most within it. But equally, it will help the gifted and talented children because it will allow them to make progress further ahead if necessary as well. Okay, so hopefully that answers that question.
You crushed it, Paul. Thank you. Rounding out the accelerated model, or the idea of acceleration, Paul, I think the research that we're doing, the information that we're gathering in our studies independently at Edmentum, but then also leveraging information that's out there. So I'll put in chat at some point some of the data. There's an EdWeek research article too that really talks about that inline acceleration model where we're putting information and student, right here in the midpoint, that learner makes and covers more information when you're not removing and you're putting content and curriculum and resources in line with them in that instructional strategy. So that, to me, dovetails into what you're talking about, Paul, with that 0.93 return on that investment. That's pretty impressive and cool to see. Okay, a couple more topics. Flexibility. This is that word that we just can't shake, right? We have to be flexible, whether we're pivoting or we're offering more or we're thinking about maintaining the flexibility that's there. Again, fully online programming is something that Edmentum can help with, right? We offer literally a virtual academy, but it's also the idea of that courseware option. So pick a subject, pick an approach, pick a grouping of skills that you want to customize into a course that maybe has never been offered before, or a combination of skills and content from multiple disciplines and package that into, you know, a course, if you will. A module is a module. It's aligned to an outcome of a skill with mastery. You build out those modules into an instructional cadence that you would want. Therefore, you have not just 400 courses, but thousands of specific skills that you can organize in a way that fits your unique programming. And again, the goal is to set your program apart, increase visibility and marketing and branding, and allow you to continue to do good things. That is leveraging digital curriculum that we offer, you know, to its fullest extent. Where there's flexibility outside of that is, again, thinking about there could be a combination of these things. And I know Paul has ideas, or probably an example in a second, of where a school is certainly using ExactPath, or a program is saying, all right, let's diagnose, let's use a screener and get everybody on the same page. Here's content, but we've also identified some social emotional needs, or we're growing the whole child approach within our programming and using, you know, SEL type content to support and again, differentiate programming. And oh, by the way, we're also offering, you know, fully online 24/7 content through the virtual programming. I don't know if we have a school, Paul, that's using everything, but you know, that I just illustrated how they could maybe. So
yeah, no, we haven't got one school that's using everything, but I think it's probably important for me to put some context in terms of examples there. So
yeah,
when we talk about Ed Options Academy, which is our online teachers teaching your students, then yeah, absolutely, there are a number of schools around the world that are using that facility. Universal American, again within the Middle East, is one that springs to mind immediately. And they're using it for a combination of credit recovery, because it's been a difficult year, yeah, and indeed for first-time credit. So they, as Daryl rightly mentioned, are looking to expand their course options, because that might give them a competitive advantage over the school down the road. And through our academy, they can offer courses like, for instance, artificial intelligence, green energy development, robotics, international business, entrepreneurship. There are 400 courses that they could offer in combination with what they're already delivering within their curriculum within school. I've had conversations again, and forgive me for this all being the Middle East, but last week, and they've lost a teacher. That teacher has left the school, and that teacher used to teach 4 subjects. And so actually they're thinking, well, do we need to replace that teacher, or can we use one of your teachers and actually get lots more courses from it? So we can cover the 4 courses that teacher used to teach, but actually we can expand even further the options that we can offer our children by offering different courses, because we can come to your academy and your academy can fill that void and actually add extra courses for the same price that we were paying that one teacher. Yeah, so there's that approach to things as well. This morning I was in conversation with a school in Dubai about social emotional learning, and they're very much interested in the base curriculum for their elementary children, and they've decided to purchase the primary base education social and emotional learning point. They like it because it supports their moral education framework, which is within the UAE. it's also very, very important skills that children need to develop. And if we're looking at the future of work and the 21st century skills that are needed, most of those soft skills are contained within the base education framework, whether that's in elementary, middle school, or high school. It helps to develop those 21st century skills that are really going to be critically important in the future.
Yep.
So yeah, there's an awful lot. And the problem when Daryl and I do get to talking is that there's far too much. And it's really our jobs is to identify, well, what's your school improvement plan? How can we help you with your specific aspect? Yeah, and that's the key thing, really, because as Daryl said at the start, we can literally support any school on any area that they want to grow in, really, because of what we've got sitting behind us in terms of specialisms and content and courses and all sorts of things. Back to you, Daryl.
Yeah, no, I love it. And what you're really getting into too, Paul, I think, is the question at hand. And I answered it in the Q&A, but I'll say it out loud a little bit too. When we think about school improvement versus, or within that school development, I think there's a subtle difference where, Paul, you're talking about a school thinking about improving their offerings or rounding out their or development rather. It's muddy, but you look to increase your offerings, round out, like you said, the whole learner approach, giving students ways to be better at self-governance, self-agency, regulation, working through emotions, things of that nature, conflict resolution. But then it's also, where does that fit in the whole sequence of things? That to me fits under that development. You're continually tinkering with your programming. School improvement, in my sense, lies in that at some point we have to measure success. And often it's that learner achievement spot, and it's also the governance and the oversight of agencies where we're looking at how schools are doing and leveraging those metrics. To me, that is that school improvement metric. That's kind of how I differentiate those. I might be off base a little bit, but quickly, I just wanted to highlight a unique way that community connection can be maintained. In San Francisco, in California, in the US, they're doing some interesting things around putting community pods. So learners that maybe don't want to or don't need to, or for a variety of reasons are looking to maybe maintain their spot at home, they're given opportunity to have resources close to that. And the community resources are also in there. So now going to that SEL spot, like Paul was highlighting, now the community is part of supporting that student, helping them maybe work through content and schoolwork, but then there's also other pieces, food service programs, activities, options for other community members to volunteer and support, sports and athletic programming, other ways that you can imagine that you'd want to allow resources to be given within, but you maybe couldn't offer all of that in your location where learners were coming to. So it is that school without doors mentality where you're saying, yes, Paul, you are part of the Daryl Academy here, but I'm only going to see you literally in the building on Mondays and Fridays. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you are asynchronous and you have, expectations, but then also on Wednesdays, you're at the community site doing X, Y, and Z, because at the Daryl Academy building, we don't have a pool, and we want, to have movement in your life, right? It's a simple example, but you can kind of pick up what I'm laying down here. So it's the idea of offering and extending those enrichment activities to learners that you otherwise maybe wouldn't have. Just food for thought. It might not be something you implement tomorrow, but it's certainly something that you could think about long term. Per usual, Paul and I are up against the clock, so I'm gonna work through some instructional strategies again. Just starting high level, personalization. The more we can say This is how you learn. This is how we can scaffold and give instruction that meets the needs of where you as the learner are at. And then secondary to that, we're really seeing a push, and this is directly tied to that personalization, of movement to facilitation models. And I'm going to explain that a little bit. Traditionally, and I did this even when I was teaching grade level 5 here in the US, well, more years ago than I'm caring to admit now, but I was very proud of my knowledge of all of the grade 5 material, and I was pretty sure that I was explaining it best, and I had all of my learners facing me and I was facing them, and I was very good at the sage on the stage model. I have wished I could travel back in time to give my students more ways and more flexibility in how they were absorbing the important information that we were covering. So moving from the sage on the stage model to more of that facilitation, guide on the side. This is a trend that is important. This is a trend that is research-based. And when we think about how to leverage digital curriculum and content that is flexible because it can be accessed anywhere, you really start to see ways that an instructor can start to shift their pedagogy and their instructional stylings to meet those learners in that personalized way. And let me show you a graphic. Now, there's a lot on here, but if you kind of just notice, you have 4 boxes. On the left, box 1 here is that direct instruction moment. The learner has to hear it. I have to tell Paul that we're talking about, you know, photosynthesis today, right? But if he maybe had a chance to preview photosynthesis by engaging in digital content, maybe he does a lesson inside of courseware that I cherry picked for him and had for him now, or the whole class, right? So now when he's coming in to hear me do a direct instruction, again, it could be via Zoom if we're still in distance learning, could be face-to-face and everything in between. That first box gives us options on leveraging content that bolsters and supports or gives learners a leg up on what we're talking about. Now, if I'm talking about photosynthesis in box 1, it's not the first time he hears it. He can start activating blooms there a little bit and even start to synthesize ideas that he has around that. Secondary to that, you could flip it. I do talk to Paul about photosynthesis for the first time. I wow him with my presentation. He's so amazed. And then next, he's going to then engage in some digital content and resources that I've offered him. Now we have that same preview review, but it's more of a review spot for him, and he's working on it. It also fits that I do, now you do model that we're universally applying when we think about UDI and instructional strategies. So the goal here is, if we're then moving into that third spot, here's that opportunity for a teacher to double check. I introduced photosynthesis. Paul did some work in courseware. He read and did the tutorial. And then there was a formative mastery check for understanding. Now I have an opportunity, wholesale, I can look at all of my learners and see who gets it and who doesn't. They've heard it from me. They work through the content. They've taken a quick check for understanding, formative assessment, even 5 questions. And now I can scaffold and support. So this could be a 2-day, this could be a 4-day. I've seen extrapolated out over 5 days, especially if the middle day is an asynchronous day. There's ways to think about how we instruct that personalizes, that removes us from that sage on the stage, but it gets us to more blue, right? So I'm going to just boil this down to the idea of when we leverage tools effectively in our programming, we can decrease the amount of time where one person is talking and increase the amount of time where many are talking, and that's the blue. Research supports the more learners are engaging with other learners, multiple modalities of content, over time, that's going to increase achievement straight away. And that's the easy one. You're just shifting a little bit of that instructional strategy as you go along. Paul, how are we doing on Q&A and chat? I know we have about 10 minutes. I want to be...
Chat, we're okay. Q&A. Some of our clients would not be too familiar with pods or clubs. If you could go into the concept for them, that would help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that competition amongst private schools, Roseanne, I think is something that we're trying to dance along, right? Paul and I are tuned into the idea of helping unique circumstances or unique programming bolster what they're offering and grow. That can extend into the community. That's not going to hurt. It ultimately is what's best for kids. And if you're branding and you're looking to, show that your mission and vision is outside of your specific doors, that's never a bad thing. Might it overlap other places? Yeah, that's probably true. We all play in the same sandbox and have to get along sometimes, I think. So that's the idea there. Where I'm wholesale pushing out the concepts, yeah, I hope every program starts to adopt and shift to that personalized approach. And then again, that goes back to the question of school improvement and the metrics and increasing those specific numbers from your oversight and from your learners' assessments and things. Paul, anything to add to that as we travel along a little bit?
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, I mean, it's not my thoughts. These are Dr. Abdullah Karam's thoughts, who's the head of the KHDA in Dubai, and he's very much a visionary and looks at the model of education and how they may and could change in the future. And he's frequently saying that schools may need to adapt, they may need to change. Just as you've mentioned that the phrase flexibility, but there's also community. I mean, he hypothesizes that will we ever reach a stage where a student could go to one school for maths, another school for English, another school for science? So like I can see now that the delegates who are listening to this thinking, oh what, no way. But that's the ultimate version of flexibility, where you choose that you can go, well, I go to certain places for one subject, and that's taking it to its extreme. And then if that does happen, what does the school building become? And it becomes more of a community hub that you do other things in, so that there's all sorts of things that are taking place and possible. And it's just what's realistic and relevant in the world that's important. I mean, we already partner with schools ourselves. So we're already teaching, we're already providing courses for schools. So they could already be in two schools. One of them is with us and the other one is their actual physical building that they're in. So there's tentative steps there. I mean, Dr. Abdullah does take it to extremes, but then there's lots of competition within Dubai, which means there's lots of different thinking which is taking place because they're all competing for the same students and the same money within the Dubai space. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does to me. I think it's a strong indicator that at this moment, we really do have a good opportunity to really think about what we're currently doing and what could be best for programs to evolve and change. I stopped sharing for a second just to put into chat a couple of the resources I promised. One is a white paper around Edmentum's addressing COVID loss. And then also the article that is talking about acceleration rather than remediation, which is, again, illustrating and highlighting some of the reasoning that I'm coming from with the resources that we're talking about and sharing today. It is always important for Paul and I, when we discuss and talk, is to come at you with that reason that we're working through this. And somebody asked, are we going to do more trainings on this? So to round out our time, here's kind of how this can and would look, right? Is Paul Montague is, everybody knows Paul. You can reach out to Paul, you can call him, you can stop by his house. The goal there is to continue the conversation. He's phenomenal at vetting and parsing out what the root is and what you're after. And then from there, solutioning into what could or would be next. Past that is the relationship that he and I have around that consultative approach. So when it turns from a product solution and implementation conversation to a CPD or a leadership work or mission and vision or integration, into these facets of school programming that aren't necessarily specific to a product. That's where Paul and I have had great success working with programs and building out consultative trainings and professional development. And that's where Ron has really helped shape that Edmentum is both a product opportunity for you, but then we're also that consultative and educational resource to help you get to where you want to go, even beyond specific products. How'd I do, Paul? Does that round out?
Yeah, very good, very good. It's probably worth me mentioning more on the CPD aspect, actually, so the continuing professional development. We're currently working with Sharjah's Private Education Authority, which is another regulatory body that does a similar job to AIAA, but it does it in Sharjah, okay? And they basically are wanting us to deliver 3 courses for all of the teachers in Sharjah. One of them is on the future of education. What should we have learned from this last year and a half we're getting to now, nearly? Yeah, what should we take forward? One of them is on how do you evaluate digital curriculum? What makes the best digital curriculum? What are the functions of that curriculum? How is it designed? What pedagogical approaches should we be looking for within it? And the other one is looking at the whole learning. And we've touched upon that already, and it's looking at social emotional learning and the whole, how that affects the whole learner in terms of academics, its importance, not only from an academic perspective, but its importance from a well-being perspective and the future of healthy and the citizens. So those are the types of things that we can do. But again, it's very difficult for us to say one thing that we can do. It really, and this is where the types of conversations I have are, the school will approach me and say, well, look, we've got our school improvement plan. We're thinking of doing, we want to know about this particular area. And then we'll chat about that, and we'll get down to into a phrase that was brought to me this morning, which is the nitty gritty around it. And then
there you go. We'll decide the nitty gritty.
Indeed. And then we'll decide what the plan should be moving forward. Okay.
I think a good story also is I was working with a school in the States, and the school leadership was really highlighting, we want to not pay for paper books anymore. We want to be agile and be flexible. And I said, that's a great idea. I can help. And then I asked a couple more questions. I said, how do your teachers feel about that? What's the response going to be from the community? What technology resources have you considered? And eyes got bigger and bigger. So the question in chat was, what sets us apart? It isn't going to be okay, here's the product, here's the price, good luck, but and a little bit of support on how to use the tool. It's going to be a consultative approach where our products will be implemented to fit in line with your mission and vision and hopes and dreams of what you're trying to get out of it. So it is that ultimate ROI, that ultimate return on the investment. And that's both monetary, but also time. And teachers and students need to be efficient and effective with what they're doing. And we're going to highlight and visualize that with you and during that initial approach. So that way, and ultimately, we did some customized change management strategies with school leadership talked about project management and then helped school leaders implement a 2-year rollout that was less stressful for their teachers. And year 1 was a little bit of less books and more digital, and year 2 is going to be predominantly digital with less paper text, and they're currently wrapping up year 1. So it's the idea of we can absolutely customize and approach what you're looking for, which would set your school program apart from others.
Yeah, I mean, the people in Edmonton who are much higher up than Daryl and I have done a very good job in that they've created a portfolio of solutions that really is very, very comprehensive. And so we respond to your needs rather than trying to sell you one thing in particular because that's the only thing that we've got. We really do listen to what your needs are and then tailor our solutions accordingly. Yeah.
Perfect. There's a question, and Ron, this might be back to you. Is there certificates of participation or certificates of attendance? Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
there
for
you
those
go.
who participated
you nailed it.
today,
Yeah, you're already
yes.
on it. Yep.
I've already
Great.
answered that. Yes, there is.
You did. You nailed it. Thank you. Good.
There's a question here, Daryl, about how long our approach has been implemented. I think we need to qualify that in terms of that there's lots of different approaches that we can take.
Yeah. I mean, as long as there's been research, Edmentum has been adjusting and changing product function and adding enhancements, again, since the 60s. So always could be the answer. The strategies and ideas that are being presented today around kind of some of this future context, I think is in newer stages, and to varying degrees. It depends. I do have schools here in the US that I've worked closely with over the last handful of years, 2, 3, 4 years, where that flexible and personalized programming is in place and has been for a few years. So depends, right, on the strategy, like you're saying, Paul, and kind of the product too. ExactPath is 3 years old. Courseware is 60. So
yeah, I mean, to give you some context as well, we're in conversations at the moment with the Emirates schools, which is essentially the national schools across the UAE, about ExactPath and what that could do. They've seen the impact that it's had within the charter schools and the improvement that's it's resulted in there, and so they're looking very, very favorably at that at the moment.
Yep.
We're working with the Saudi government in terms of looking at literacy, and the Ministry of Education there in terms of looking at literacy and trying to helping them to build a bespoke package that's going to support Saudi Arabia and their 2030 agenda by using different bits of our solutions in different ways. We're in conversation with some universities even in Saudi Arabia that have got a foundation program for children when they just go to university. And it's the content that within our courseware, we've got over 400 courses. And then you can break that down into 12 units of content on everything. And so they're going to use that digital curriculum and pick and mix from all of the courses that we've got to create their own PYP year. And I use PYP there as not as in the IB program, but as in a preparatory year before they go into to university. So there's all sorts of things that we can do. So, and we're more than willing to help. As I say, I specialize in supporting the Middle East, but I've got colleagues who work around the world and support the different regions around the world as well.
Yeah, you're stuck with me in that realm as well, so that's okay. Paul, Ron, I appreciate the opportunity today. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to see you two gents and talk some education. I appreciate it. Thanks, Ron.
Okay, thanks everyone for participating, and we appreciate your participation today. And again, Edmentum is an option for our schools toward improvement, as we heard today. And I like the term that Daryl, that you used, is that bell can't be unrung. And I think this gives our schools, after this momentous historical circumstance of the last year and a half and teaching and learning in a pandemic, to build upon the best practices, and we can't look backward. We do have to look forward to see how we can integrate more resources into our schools. So thank you, Paul and Daryl, for your presentation today. And we wish everyone a good day and a good planning summer as we look to reopen schools in the fall.
Thank you.
Great, thanks everybody.
Thank you.